about taking this off the shoulders of one individual and spreading it around and bringing the collective effort. Darrell was very passionate about the fact that all eyes are on you, Chief. What you do, what you say, etc. You are the face of this for the Ottawa Police Service. We're looking to bring a plan to you so that essentially you're not going to be seen as a single point of failure. The chief responded, and understandably, he responded very quickly that he was not the single point of failure in this, and unless he had confidence in what his team could do, he's not going to support it or approve it. He went on a bit of a talk in that regard just to explain. I actually, on behalf of our team, apologize because it was not the intent of our being there that day. Mm-hmm. Our intent was to go there and walk away with support that we were unified and let's get this done.
So at the end of that afternoon meeting, was anything agreed on?
We still did not have an approved plan.
You did not? There
was no explicit approval of the plan that day. That did not come until, I'm sorry, this was the 11th?
This was the 12th.
That did not come until the 13th.
Okay. Now, if we go down on your will say to page 8, there is a bullet that starts with, that's right, we had discussion about integrating the command, location of CP. What's CP?
Yeah, command post or integrated command center.
Right. So this is in reference to discussion about where to set up the command post if there is to be an integrated command, right?
Yes.
And you said there's some apparent momentum being gained with a new IC. What's the IC?
Instant Commander, Rob Bernier.
Okay. So nothing was agreed as of yet on the 12th, but you were sensing apparent momentum from the new commander who was Rob Bernier.
That's correct, sir.
And then if we go down further, I reviewed and signed off of our detailed ops plan by the end of this date, and did so as did the RCMP. All that was required was approval by OPS. What do you mean by that?
Well, we had given them the plan, and we had hoped that they would approve it. Again, as supporters of the OPS, we weren't in a position to start actioning the plan without their approval.
Okay. So let's go to the 13th. The first bullet, we still did not have approval from Chief Slowly yet. In consult with OPP Senior Command, forge ahead with developing roles of Senior and Strategic Command and the absolute importance of these roles in support of the incident commanders. Could you explain that to us?
And that's one of the significant benefits of integrated command. So the way that we set it up, we had a seniors table, which is deputy commissioners and deputy chiefs with the Ottawa Police Service. We had our strategic command, which I then, after we went to Kinetic, became a member of the strategic command with the RCP and the OPS. And then we had our incident commanders to 3 guys. So the whole goal there is to give them objectives, be a sounding board. We're able to effectively keep anything and everything political out of it. They are able to strictly focus on operations. We're able to give them feedback, report up, report down. They're never reporting, jumping over a rank. They're reporting to us, and we're updating the seniors table to ensure that they're aware of everything that's going on and the progress that we're making with their daily objectives.
Mm-hmm. So you were forging ahead at this time, even though there wasn't a final approval yet.
Our team remained incredibly optimistic throughout this, and in spite of the adversity that we faced at times, And I mean, I'd like to say this because I think it's important to be said. There was still amazing collaboration and support to get things done. Everybody in Ottawa, from the chief down, wanted this to be over.
Mhm.
And we were with them in that way. So there was a lot of tremendous work, and we, at no time did we just do a full stop and say, well, until we get approval, there's nothing else we can do. There was tons more that we could do. So we never stopped from day one until I left there on the 27th or 28th, whatever it was of February.
So by 3:50 that day, it appears as though your optimism was justified because you received a call from Incident Commander Bernier, who was accompanied by the Major Critical Incident Commander Springer. And then if we go down 2 bullets, sub-bullets, you see that, yes, the plan is approved, right?
Yes.
So he approved it as the incident commander was entitled to do. And then at 6:05 p.m. that day, if we go down further, you discussed the above with Deputy Chief Ferguson. She advised that she fully agreed with Bernier's authority to sign off, that we were good to go. Was that accurate?
It's accurate. I made that call because of concerns in all partner organizations but we don't have approval from the chief yet, which is what we have been expecting all along. So that call got made to Deputy Chief Ferguson, and following that call, I forged ahead, was completely confident we're going ahead, we're moving ahead.
So with both Bernier and Ferguson confirming the authority to sign off, was that sufficient for you on the 13th?
I accepted it, moved on, and I remember telling my boss, are we certain that the chief is on board? I'm good with it, I'm moving ahead. I've got a signed document in my hands, I'm moving forward.
Right, so there was optimism as of the 13th, but as we read on in your will say, it appears that on the 14th, the next day, there were still a few more issues to iron out. So I want to take you first to, so page 9, February 14th, the bullet that starts with key issues. Do you see? So scroll up. Yeah, that's right. Key issues dealt with through the day related to OPS need to have their lawyer approve the plan, which was understood based on everything they had been going through, however, was unusual in the context of a lawyer approving an operational plan. Now, we spoke about this a little bit, and during our interview, you clarify that perhaps approval was not the best term, and you said maybe review was a better word. Could you explain that, please?
Well, I challenged this a couple of times with some other people. Can you help me out here? Can you intervene? Can you give me some better context? And I know that Chris Rayon made a call to the lawyer, and that's what came back. Well, no, I'm not approving the plan. I've been asked to review it before it's actioned. Mm-hmm. In my view, however, as much as approval may not be the right word to use, if a plan cannot be actioned before it's reviewed, then it's not approved.
Okay, so that's the first issue on the 14th.
Yes.
Another issue that you spoke about is if we go down the page, please. The bullet that starts with furthermore. Furthermore, it was determined throughout this date that Incident Commander Bernier was being pulled away continuously to brief his chief. And this was creating frustration within our planning group, especially as it related to the POU component. I tactfully addressed this concern with the OPS. How did you tactfully address it?
I just told him we need it. He is critical, absolutely critical to this operation. He is the key decision maker, a key incident commander, and he needs his input is absolutely unequivocally required, especially as we were looking at the POU plan, which was the crux of our plan to dismantle the protests. He was absolutely vital to his success and needed. So obviously, I was the person that often went to OPS to have discussions, but throughout my time there, I would get the feedback from the different planning components that we need access to this, we need access to this, can we make this up? So I was a guy trying to work our way around any barriers that we were facing. And I know that the lead planners who had tremendous trust and confidence in just said, we need him. And he's being pulled away again. We need him back here ASAP. If we're going to put this together, his input is critical. We can't spend hours and hours developing a tactical solution that the incident commander can't support.
Mhm. So those are the first two issues. There was a third issue. If we go up the page, I want to take you to the bullet that starts with while it was established. There we have it. While it was established that all key commanders would be kept in the loop, it was learned that the mayor of Ottawa had engaged with the protesters and negotiated them to all move to Wellington Street, and that OPS made some decision on action. So, and then the next bullet says that Incident Commander Bernier briefed you at around just after 6 o'clock, that due to the mayor's decision, it was a good time to take positive action on those who stayed outside of Wellington. Now, in your interview with us, you describe this action plan as uncharacteristic of Bernier. Why did you say that?
It's just that he was well aware of the overarching plan that we had created for them that would systematically dismantle the protest zone, and to go back to the chunk by chunk dismantling would require additional resources, and he knew that. We challenged Bernier on the plan, but we brought the key members of the team into it, PLT, Intel, POU. They actually supported it. So it wasn't like, we don't want to do this. Okay, now we have a plan and we're going to pivot. So we need to adjust. So are we all on the same page as where we're going? And ultimately, it did not happen.
What did not happen? The action.
The action.
Right.
And I'm wrestling my brain. I do believe it relates to a resource reliability from a POU perspective. So this is the tactical portion of our operations plan, the POU. So ultimately, it did not occur either, because it was, again, it was contrary to the plan, the systematic plan that had been proposed. But again, when we put the team together, POU said, yep, we think it's doable. If it can resource, PLT felt that they had exhausted all that they could do with this particular group. And Intel gave us nothing that would suggest that it would be ill-advised to do so. So it's like, okay, we're good to go. Now we have to start resourcing. And I do believe it ultimately came down to a resourcing issue why it did not occur.
Right. So it would appear that all of these issues on the 14th, the first day of the supposed integration, caused you sufficient concern that the next morning, you spoke to the OPP Commissioner Carrick. Am I right?
Sure. Which date?
Sorry?
The next date, you said?
The next day, yeah, February the 15th.
15th.
Let me show you a document that may help refresh your memory. OPP 401785 at page 28, please. So this appears to be a phone call that you made to Commissioner Carrick, where you raised some of these concerns and about the unified command, and you asked for his intervention. So if we go down the page, I'm looking for where it says, is this page 28? I'm looking for the reference where it says the elephant in the room.
So I reviewed those notes. I unfortunately, after retiring, my notes all went back to archives, and I just got them back yesterday.
So you remember reading that?
I remember reading this, but this is not in reference to a conversation with the commissioner. It might have been from an earlier conversation, but at that time I was in a meeting with our broader group. I was called out for a conversation with the commissioner in relation to providing an update to the Ottawa Police Services Board. It was a brief call out from that meeting. I do, however, recall talking about my challenges.
Right.
I have made statements through this that publicly were integrated. but in reality, we're still missing a lot. So we're truly not integrated until we reach all of these points. We are still at times working in silos. So if an action is going to happen, if the broader group who's planning for resources to support it is not aware of it, it just makes it difficult to action any type of plan.
So you might have just anticipated my question, because I was going to ask you for the context where this conversation took place and to explain this statement that you apparently made to Commissioner Carrick. The elephant in the room is, can you read that to us?
But it's not my writing, so I equally,
okay, so
if my scribe wrote
we're on
this
equal
down.
grounds here. The elephant
In the room is everything we have done so far have been blocked by the OPS chief.
So these are notes that attribute things that to you, things that you apparently said. Did you say this?
Conversations, yes. That, you know, we were in an intense planning meeting that morning because we got our approval the day before, like we're good to go. We were in a significant meeting when I got called. My phone started ringing and I did not answer it after multiple times. And finally I got the nod that, you know, the commissioner needs to speak with you ASAP. Can you? So I exit the meeting and I left my scribe at the meeting. And I went and had a separate meeting with the commissioner and 2 deputies. And it's in different notes. So when my scribe was with me, I took another notebook and I took my own notes. So there's other notes that overlap the exact same time here.
So in that context, you asked for his intervention.
You know, recall, like, because I knew that they had a relationship certainly much more significant than mine. I met Chief Slowly at a swearing in for his job and at a conference once, I believe, but I really didn't know him like the commissioner did. And I just thought, if you have any influence that you can talk with it so we can move things along, please do so. And again, it's based, in fairness to Chief Slowly, it is now based on how things have gone and what I'm being told that it's, you know, we're waiting for the chief on this, we're waiting for the chief on that, we have to wait for the chief on this. So I'm just asking, you know, if there's something we can do to intervene, please let's do it so we can move this thing along. Everybody on the team had a goal to get out of Ottawa as quickly as we could, but doing so safely and efficiently with a plan that would end these protests.
Right. So, so that was the morning of the 15th. As we know, later that day, the former chief resigned. And in your interview with us, you said that the implementation of the February 13th plan moved more quickly after Chief Slowly's resignation. What did you mean by that? Moving more slowly, moving more quickly.
It was just that, you know, it resigned and it was like, let's go. Everybody from OPS, we're ready to go. And we just fully implemented everything that was in the plan.
Okay.
And there were still barriers. I mean, we still had our issues. I don't want to think that I don't want anybody to think that it was just Chief Slowly. We had issues right throughout the deployment in Ottawa that we wrestled to the ground. But, you know, once that happened, for example, the meeting that I was called to go to with the board also got canceled. So that freed up my time to put focus where it needed to be.
Now, in my remaining time, I hope I have another, I believe I have another 15 minutes or so. So in my remaining time, I want to focus your attention.
A little over 17.
Oh, that's very good news indeed. Now we've been speaking about the February 13th plan. And that was the one that you and Lou and Bernie approved. And then, as I understand it, the Integrated Planning Group continued to work with the OPS to develop that plan until it was finalized on or around the 17th. Is that right?
Correct.
And between those dates, the 13th and the 17th, something happened on the 14th, which was the invocation of the Emergencies Act.
Correct.
So I want to ask you now about, can you confirm whether the final plan of February the 17th contemplate the use of any powers or any measures made available under the Emergencies Act?
Yes, it did.
Sorry?
It did. It did incorporate.
And tell me about that.
Well, like every plan, one of the things that every operational plan considers is your people. Our people are our absolute most valuable asset that we have in the operational plan. And it's important that we have information and inform them of everything. So we ensured that our officers were aware of the piece of legislation that Parliament had given us and to use it to the best of our ability.
Now, during your interview with us in the summer, and I guess in September as well, you said the group had a lot of debate about the authorities that the Act provided, and so on. But did the police in Ottawa ended up needing the Emergencies Act to tow vehicles?
No.
Explain to us why not.
Well, you know, if we didn't have the Emergency Act, that would imply that we couldn't tow vehicles. We tow vehicles every day for different things. We have laws under the Highway Traffic Act. We have common law authorities that we use on a regular basis. So you know, if a vehicle is used in the commission of an offense, it's evidence, or whatever the case may be, we have various authorities to seize and or remove or tow that vehicle. So we did not need the Emergencies Act. We had legislation under the province that also assisted us when it comes to towing and removing permits and CVORs and impounding vehicles. But again, we did not explicitly need those authorities to tow a vehicle.
Mm-hmm. And you also said that the police would have managed to put an end to the protests without the Emergencies Act. They would have done so within the timeline that the cell was contemplating before the federal government declared an emergency. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, I think it just says what it says. Our operational plan, when we put it in place, we did not have those authorities. It did not suddenly turn us on our heels that we had to change a lot. We just added it to the plan. It helped. I'm not going to say that it was not useful. It certainly, it provided us with some authorities relating to toll, relating to perimeters, relating to preventing people from going into the red zone, et cetera. But we could have done that anyway.
So in your view, was the Emergencies Act necessary to end the protests in Ottawa?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'm a police officer. Parliament gives us legislation. We don't make legislation. They provide it to us and we use it to the best of our abilities. They gave us a piece of legislation to use. We were thankful for it and we used it to the best of our abilities to incorporate in our plan.
And in your view, was there a police solution to the demonstrations?
A police solution? Yes.
Policing solution?
There was a solution and we reached that solution. We had some help with the EMCPA, the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act regulations that we have at the province, and the Emergencies Act. But in my humble opinion, we would have reached the same solution with the plan that we had without either of those pieces of legislation.
Within around the same timeline?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to tell the commissioner that I haven't yet asked you?
I don't think so, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So, counsel for former Chief Slowly, please.
I'm Tom Curry.
Please speak.
Chief Party, the events that you became involved in the first week of February, I think the 8th.
Yes, sir.
Unprecedented in your experience?
Absolutely one of a kind, sir.
And unforeseen by anyone in your command in the Northeast region at the time that the convoy protesters who came through the Northeast traveled through there. Is that fair?
No, I would say that in my role and my operations superintendent who prepared an ops plan, which was largely traffic-based, but in partnership with the municipal police services that the convoy went through, the end reports, what we were hearing, we kind of felt that Ottawa was kind of in for it.
Right. And in your command at that time, did the OPP have an opportunity for you to share your conclusions or what was going on in the Northeast as the convoy came along?
Well, all of that was reported up. There was a major incident commander overseeing it as it went through Northwest region into my region. PLT was engaged heavily with the protesters. They were traveling in vehicles. For example, they split at Highway 11 and 17. The weather in the north was terrible. The heavy trucks came down 17. The smaller vehicles where we felt was safer, the weather was less severe because of the lake effect, the Superior. They went via Highway 11. So the convoy split there. Everything, I was not deeply involved. In fact, I was in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, arrived there 7:30, 8 p.m. at night for business the next day. Because at that stage, I had a team that looked after them and I trusted that I had a plan, the ops plan that the ops superintendent has signed off on, Intel led. I'm good to go. Just keep me informed if there's any difficulties. I was doing my regular business. I remember distinctly because it took me 15 to 20 minutes to turn into my hotel because the convoy was coming through with the steady stream of tractor trailers, so I couldn't get turned.
And so if I follow that, you were in the Sioux, your team is running the convoy, observing the convoy. Presumably you had squad cars, marked vehicles, unmarked vehicles.
Yes.
In the presence of the convoy as they came into and exited your region.
Yes, sir.
And passed along whatever intelligence could be gathered about the scale of the protest and those PLT interactions.
We did, but it didn't work that way, sir. I mean, this is a major event for the OPP. So there's an instant commander in Aurelia. Everything is being fed up through logs with PLT. We're seeing it, but we're not having to report it because Aurelia is actually getting it.
Understood. So does Aurelia, two things. Thank you for that. Two things. Northeast region would never have on that basis been in contact with anybody at OPS at that stage.
No, sir.
What Northeast region does is feeds that intelligence into Aurelia, a central command. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And then would it be, in your experience, would it be expected that if there was something to be gained from that intelligence that should be shared with a partner police service here, Ottawa,
Yes.
that it would be passed along to say something troublesome your way is coming?
Yes, but I didn't learn something troublesome is coming based on them coming through my region. I learned that from the briefings that we had.
Okay, got it. And are the briefings that you had, would we understand the same information that you had if we read the Hendon reports?
Generally, yes. I mean, and occasionally we participate in the calls just to get, and largely it was my ops superintendents that would be engaged in those meetings, briefing me. It was widely felt that, they're going to Ottawa for the long haul. They're going in just because of what they're looking to accomplish. We knew nobody was going to give in to those sorts of demands, like ending the health mandates for the country and shutting down government or having people from government removed. That was just not going to be accomplished. So
It made in your view, the PLT effort to engage protesters with that agenda. Well, first of all, it was unsuccessful, wasn't it?
in what way, sir?
Well, the PLT didn't negotiate the departure of protesters until the moments before the public order plan, your plan
That's
was.
correct, sir.
Okay, got it. And the at the time that they came through the Northeast region, your team would have been in touch presumably with the next region over, which I guess is this region, the East region.
East region, yes. I
So-
mean, in touch, again, we're one organization, so it's not like we're separate organizations here. It's pretty seamless.
Right.
The PLT, there'll be handoffs. These are people that work together. The Intel, all, again, these are people that work together. So my point is, my region wouldn't continue on to here. It'd just be a handoff kind of to the next team, and my team go back to their regular business.
Understood. And you yourself personally had no contact with anyone in the Ottawa Police Service until the moment that you got a call from your deputy commissioner.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Now, OPS for a minute, it's obvious, isn't it, that they would not have had on their own, with their own resources, a policing solution. They needed help.
That's fair.
And they have, you've told us that you've been part of providing help to the OPS over the years, as has the RCMP,
Yes, sir.
and as have other municipal police services.
That's correct.
And you've worked with that group, you told us, on other occasions. And that would be the universe of pools of resources. Would that be right?
That's fair, yes.
Assuming that we're not going to go another step into military aid to civil power through the military, just sticking with police services, it's OPP, RCMP, municipal police services, and I suppose I should add the Parliamentary Protective Service.
Yes, sir.
And the resources that they needed were the subject of estimates provided by the OPS through communications from Chief Slowly to Commissioner Carrick and to Commissioner Lucky, among others. Did you ever see the spreadsheet of the resource request that had been made to Commissioner Carrick, for example?
I don't think I saw it before my arrival there. I know we discussed it because I know I distinctly recall it being broken down, right, even down to civilian members and analysts,
right,
and e-crime analysts, and a whole myriad of resources. So I do recall seeing the list. We may have discussed it on that February 9th meeting. We discussed a lot of things in a short period of time. But yes, I was aware.
And the objective when a police service, and I appreciate it, it's unprecedented. So you have not seen previously a municipal police force that has been overwhelmed by protesters as this one was.
No, that's fair.
And so the main objective from the perspective now of an Ottawa Police Service would be to get the help it needs order in the community.
Yes.
And I think you learned probably from your briefings and you observed firsthand that the situation was quite grave here in Ottawa during the time of that protest.
That's a fair statement.
There obviously residents were in distress, and the city was quite in its core quite paralyzed.
It was. I mean, I have friends in the downtown core that live in the downtown core and reported to me the devastating impact that it had on their ability just to sit and think in their own living room.
Right. And as to the police service, that when we speak about a service that is overwhelmed, the best they could do with their own resources was, I think I saw in one of your notes, was that they could maintain control of the perimeter.
Yes.
And they were not possessed of sufficient resources to mobilize any kind of operation.
Correct.
Now, when the circumstances are those circumstances, would you agree with me that the top priority for that police service is to get help?
Yes.
And to try to reach out to policing partners, OPP, RCMP, the ones that we talked about. Yes.
Yes,
And that, and to define, try the best you can to define the resources that you need.
yes,
And you are in the, understandably, from the perspective of the Ottawa Police Service, they need to know what resources are available from other municipal services, OPP or RCMP, correct?
yes.
Now, the resource demand at here in Ottawa was matched by demands in other communities we know, including Windsor.
That's correct, sir.
And I don't know, it probably doesn't matter, but the Windsor blockade of the Ambassador Bridge arose following the convoy protest here in Ottawa.
It did.
Was what, to your knowledge, was the OPP able to prevent that blockade, or did it try to prevent that blockade?
I mean, I was briefed, obviously, that because it was going to impact our request here in Ottawa. I can't speak to the specifics of what was attempted prior to. Sorry.
Okay, that's all. No, that's fine. But once the blockade in Windsor was established, OPP resources were required there.
As well, yes.
And at an overlapping period here with
That's
respect
correct.
to Ottawa. Okay. Now, a couple of things, if I can. Just as to resources and operations, you told us about a plan that was reviewed. It didn't go ahead, but a plan that was reviewed here in Ottawa by the OPS to go block by block through the protest, and you favored a one operation, start to finish, right?
Correct.
Am I right that as it was defined at the time it was defined, that the OPS team had devised a block by block strategy because that reflected the resources that they had at that time? Does that make sense?
Yes, because that's exactly how it was portrayed in that February 9th. You know, take it chunk by chunk, understanding it will be resource intensive, but
Right.
one section at a time. That's fair.
And resource demands, resource requests, I think you told us that you took action when you made a resource request against what you said, I think, was a concept of plan or a concept of strategy.
Concept of operations.
Concept of operations. That's a little less than a plan. Is that fair?
That's, you know all components of what you're bringing into your plan. And you've got your SMEs now building those components, but now we know where we're going with that concept, with that skeleton. Our concept was much more detailed than the one that they provided us.
Right.
Because it did break it down in terms of the teams that we're going to need to fulfill these concepts.
Understood. They had a concept of plan.
Yes,
You had a more detailed one.
correct,
They had a plan. The integrated team brought a more detailed one.
correct.
Now, a couple of quick things, if I can, then just about the turn to the plan for a second. Could I please show you a document? It's, Madam Registrar, OPS 10470, please. I think you've seen this, Chief Party. This is, I hope I've got it. Could you scroll down, please? There it is. So you're copied on this. So you see the first email? It's from
Phil Liu,
Phil Liu, and I'm afraid I don't know his rank.
Superintendent.
Superintendent Liu, thank you. He writes to you and mainly to Deputy Chief Acting Ferguson. And do you see this? He says, find attached PowerPoint deck that outlines the plan we have been working on. Obviously, this plan originated with your plan, which we examined, bolstered, and strengthened. Fair?
Very fair, sir.
Okay. And that was your approach.
And this email is just to put proper context. In my evidence in chief, I mentioned we reached out to Trish Ferguson on that evening, and we followed up with the deck. This was the email attaching the slide deck to help her explain the plan to the chief.
Got it. Thank you. And Just want to show you one other document just to see, please, could I, Madam Registrar, switch out to OPS? I think this one has 4 zeros, 9639. So this is 10th of February to the long list there. Mostly it's, this is your own service, and it looks like other services, other municipal services. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And the reline, if we could just scroll down, please. As a follow-up to our earlier call, many police agencies have expressed an ability to support Ottawa Police Service with frontline boots on the ground. Our integrated planning cell composed of are mobilizing resources and support. Could I please ask any agency which has officers you can deploy to support the plan to please respond to that OPP email address with the number you have available, when available, and for how long? You sent that?
Yes, sir, I did. And this email was what we call the Big 12, the Big
Right.
12 police agencies in Ontario, with a couple of additional ones that had stepped up, small agencies that actually stepped up and were routinely supplying OPS with resources.
And you were able to send out that call for help for resource assistance on the 10th of February, prior to the finalization of your plan, after you had your concept.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, from a planning perspective, when you start thinking about your concept of operations and where you're needing to take it, you need to be thinking about how you're going to resource that plan. And we knew that no one organization in the province had the capacity to resource that plan. So it's like kind of putting the bug in everybody's ear as early as possible that we're coming, we need.
Indeed. And that, when you looked back at looked at what you were dealing with when you got to Ottawa, am I right that that's the kind of thing Chief Slowly had been trying to do up until that time?
It's fair. I mean, I hadn't watched closely. I know I saw some of the media repeated, asked for a resource. Absolutely, I saw that.
Got it. Thank you. Could I show the witness, please? OPP, I think 4 zeros, 1389. Just get your help, if I could, Chief Party, with a couple of other things. This is a situation report. Maybe, can I see page 8? I'm certain that I might have the wrong number. If that's the case, I'll take this down. But could I see page 8, please?
Councillor, there are only 5 pages in this
I've
document.
got the wrong one. All right, I'm going to come back to it unless I'm whisked off the stage. Can I speak for a minute about what you told us about Chief Slowly? There, no doubt, is there, Chief Party, that Chief Slowly had the hardest job in the country during the time he was the chief during this time.
I would agree, sir.
The city was under siege and the service was under siege.
Yes, sir.
Did you know anything at all when you got there about the circumstances of Chief Slowly's tenure as the chief of police?
No, sir.
Thank you. And any difficulties that he faced here in Ottawa, either with issues that arose because of his race, or issues that arose because of his inability to lead the change that he had been asked to lead?
No, sir. I was not aware.
Clearly, he had, at the time that you observed it, a very difficult relationship with his command team.
It's fair.
And others
Yes.
below the senior command. You agreed, you observed during the time that you were here, or maybe even before you got here, there were political issues that were raised about Ottawa Police Service's handling of this crisis,
Yes, sir.
both at the Ministry of the Solicitor General, with some controversies about what resources were here or not, right?
Yes.
And at the level of the federal government, with political leaders making statements about what was going on in their city.
That's correct.
All of which added to the complexity and challenge here for him.
Absolutely.
Did you also, I take it towards the end of your time here, you became aware that the Police Services Board and the Municipal Council had expectations of Chief Slowly and the service that they would tell them that there was a plan and indeed be briefed upon it.
Yes.
And that's how you were asked to go, and you checked in with your commissioner to see if you should.
No, I actually just flat out denied and said I'm not going. And then I was asked in a follow-up from the commissioner, in light of the Borden report from G20, you know, the board has certain roles and responsibilities, and he felt it would be appropriate for me to make a presentation to the board in light of those key responsibilities that the board has, which I understood. But again, that plan, that could only be done with Chief Slowly's approval.
Understood. And it's unusual in your experience to brief political actors on operations plans.
To the detail that we were seeing, absolutely. Very unusual.
And so a couple of other quick things, if I can. Were you aware that a member of Chief Slowly's service, the OPS, contacted Superintendent Morris about his attendance at the briefing?
No, sir.
Without telling Chief Slowly that he was going to do that? You didn't know anything about that?
No, sir.
Were you aware as to how the senior command had divided its responsibilities here for this event? And particularly, did you know that Deputy Chief Ferguson was responsible for the plan?
Yes, I knew. I mean, she was the person that I dealt with pretty much exclusively after I arrived in Ottawa, in terms of when I had contentious issues or things to deal with, or questions about getting the plan approval. It was Deputy Chief Ferguson. And
that Deputy Chief Bell was responsible for the intelligence lead.
I don't know if I was aware. I certainly learned that he was, but certainly not aware. I mean, I had met Deputy Chief Bell at that initial meeting, and until he became interim chief, I don't think I had two words with him.
Got it. Thank you. I think I've now help from my colleague Commissioner. I've got the number. I was trying to show the witness. I think it's 3 zeros, Madam Reserve, 1839. Please bear with me, Chief Party. If this is not it, okay. Here we go. February 10th. Just to orient you, this is these are minutes of an integrated planning cell meeting. You talked about it, I think, earlier. Just the attendees, am I correct, just stopping there, all of the attendees are from OPP, RCMP, or other non-OPS police services?
Correct.
And it was, just scroll down if we could, to page 2. And a little bit further, if we could, please. Okay, just stop there for a second. One of the things that you were asked by my friend Mr. Rao is whether thought had been given to taking over leading this and taking over from the police of jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. And I think you indicated that no, that was not the plan.
Well, I think for that to happen, there had to be a request from the chief, and the chief made it very clear that that wasn't going to happen. Understood.
There was some suggestion within the group on the 10th. You'll see from the RCMP to support the you'll read, just stop there. Thank you. We need to slowly come back. There is suggestion from the RCMP that maybe you should take over, and you'll see it says, and I've forgotten his rank. Tetro is.
So are we in the bottom here?
Yeah. OPS saves face on this. The OPS, in its own words, is on its knees. We remove OPS from this slowly over the course of 4 to 6 or 8 shift cycles They're exhausted. They go back to work and police the rest of the city. We're going to build a police detachment, incident police by another police service within your city, same as a terrorist plane crash, and so on. Just then scroll down. You said the OPS is listening to their tactical advisors. This is brainstorming. RCMP, I'll use instead of the word tetro, but presents a viable plan. Is that the only plan? No. Is it an option that should be given consideration? Absolutely. I won't go through the rest of it, but at this meeting, consideration was given to thinking about replacing OPS.
So I think context is very important here.
Sure.
And the context is here starts with they're on their knees. We witness officers burn out and just getting up, walking out of meetings saying, I'm done. I can't take this anymore. They were burning out daily. We saw their senior executive, Chief Slowly. The stress was very evident on all of them. That perhaps if they focus their efforts on policing the city, we'll build a plan for the event. They're still going to be involved, but just remove them from the equation to allow them to build some strength. Because quite frankly, we saw the burnout, we saw the stress, we saw the anxiety, right, throughout the whole event. Right?
Is it fair to say that one of the things that may have eroded trust between the integrated planning cell team and Chief Slowly and maybe others was the idea that maybe there was a plan to replace OPS?
There was never, sir, a plan to replace OPS. And we never talked. We had lots of brainstorming sessions. You know, we'd start every meeting by saying, listen, we need everything on the table. You have an idea, let's consider it. There was nothing off of it.
Right, thank you. Page 8 of this document, please. This is just shifting gears for 1 second. Chief Party, help us if you could with the issue of Windsor. There's some references here to the demands on, just scroll down, I think, please. There we go. RCMP POU will get to Windsor tomorrow. OPP has to pivot. If Windsor is a priority, they have to pivot. Translation, or the point being made that Windsor is going to take resources away from, of course, from Ottawa.
Well, I think again, context is everything. The support that I and my team receive never changed in terms of we'll get what we need. Well, going back to my very first meeting with Ottawa Police, we were very clear that we're looking at this not just at the local level, we're looking at the provincial and the national level. And we have to keep our eyes on all that. What's happening in Coutts could have an impact here. What's happening in Manitoba could have an impact here. So we as a team wanted to be alive to that. When the word pivot became very instrumental throughout the deployment. It was used a lot. We had to pivot daily on things because our plan needs to be able to pivot and adjust to impacts to it. So when Windsor happened, we needlessly knew that, okay, we're not going to get all that is available because Windsor is going to need some.
Got it.
And Windsor, it became not the priority, it became a priority.
Understood.
In my view. Ottawa never changed in my, I did not say, okay, I'm going to put my focus on Windsor. Thank you very much for letting me know about Windsor. Now let's get back to what our problem is here. Our focus still remained solely Ottawa. Understood.
Scroll down a little bit. Last bullet point on this, words attributed to you. There's a last point. RCMP advises 60 hotel rooms are available in Vanier, and that's on account of the fact that 60 POU members had to go to Windsor. You had the rooms, but you didn't have the personnel because of course, for the reasons you've given, Windsor required them.
Yep.
One thing I forgot to ask you when I talked for a moment about Chief Slowly and his circumstances. I think you told us that he was unable to attend one of the meetings. He had a different commitment. Am I right that that commitment was a risk threat assessment against him personally?
Yes, he and his family, as I understood it to be, not just him, his family as well. I mean, uncalled for, but there were threats against him.
Right, and that was a death threat.
Yes, sir.
There were other death threats that came to your attention, municipal politicians, presumably
Yes.
many others. Then could I just ask then finally the PLT? PLT, in your experience with PLT, there have had success, and they have been unable sometimes to bring protests to an end on their own without further police action.
Well, we have seen PLT used in a myriad of situations over the years. I'm a big fan of them nonetheless. I think it's obvious. We've seen them have complete success, but it depends. We use PLT and the OPP in our daily operations now. In my region, for example, I had a PLT officer in every one of my detachments. Plus, I had a full-time component in addition to the designated PLT in every one of my detachments. They handle contentious issues right down to a protest as a neighbor's between two people and resolve lots. You know, resolution, if you're saying complete resolution, there's a massive process and PLT alone was able to resolve it, that's a fair statement that doesn't happen often, but they are an instrumental part of the solution to get a protest to a workable size that allows us to effectively dismantle.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. This may be a good time for an afternoon break. I think it's, since we're going to go for certainly an hour or better. So I'll take a 15-minute break and we'll come back if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission levée pour 15 minutes. The commission is reconvened. La commission reprend.
Okay, we're back. Are you prepared to proceed? Okay. Next, I'd like to call on the Ottawa Police Service.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jessica Barrow, and I'm representing the Ottawa Police Service. We heard earlier in your evidence that the reason the integrated planning cell was created was to assist OPS. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you listed a few reasons that that was the case, but one of the ones that you listed was to restore the public's confidence in the police. Is that fair?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that the loss of public confidence in OPS was related, at least in part, to the public's perception of inaction by OPS?
Yes.
And that perhaps residents felt like the unlawful behavior of protesters was going unchecked by OPS?
Yes.
In response to that, however, you are not a proponent of leading with enforcement. Is that fair?
No, it's not fair.
It's not fair. Okay.
I'm a proponent to leading a measured approach, and if enforcement is a part of that, then absolutely. However, I think you're attributing that maybe to my comment that you're not going to arrest your way out of this. I could find 100 police leaders that would say the exact same thing.
Right. So I guess my point was that it's not the place you start. Is that fair?
It can be a part of. Strategic arrests are always a critical part of a lot of these types of operational plans. But that alone is not going to solve this problem.
Right. And your goal, I think you explained this earlier, the goal is to try to negotiate your way out prior to engaging in enforcement unless necessary.
The negotiation is a part of the plan. If you look at our plan in detail, there's a time when negotiations are no, and it calls for the next. There's always graduated steps of enforcement
Right.
running parallel to, not after, parallel to the negotiations and whatnot that are going on.
Fair enough. But because you are a proponent of that integrated model of negotiation and perhaps enforcement where necessary, you are a huge proponent, and I think you've mentioned this earlier, of the value of PLT. Is that fair?
Yes, they have proven their value over and over in major events over the years, and I would see no reason why we would not incorporate them in any type of operational plan of this nature.
And you were of the view at the time of your arrival in Ottawa that OPS was not providing a supportive environment for PLT.
That is correct. I mean, I should point out, I have knowledge about, obviously, OPS background. They wrote the book on this stuff. They do it well. It just wasn't happening.
Fair enough. And you, earlier in the commission hearings, we've heard about the national framework. I take it you're familiar with that.
I am.
And the national framework favors the use of PLT wherever possible to negotiate, correct?
Absolutely.
And so is it fair to say that the answer in response to the loss of public confidence wasn't necessarily to go in right away and start enforcing? Is that fair?
It could, again, be part of that measured response. It absolutely still could be part of a measured response where there's blatant offenses occurring to deal with them. Absolutely. But there's no one solution to this. Go in and enforce your way out of it. Not going to have to negotiate down the size of the footprint. Absolutely a viable option, along with a measured approach on enforcement.
Fair enough. So you would say that at the very least, any level of enforcement that was happening or ought to happen needed to happen in tandem with PLT.
Yes.
And for that reason, obviously, the operational plan that ultimately was agreed upon with Superintendent Bernier as the event commander did involve the strategic deployment of PLT as part of that, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, I believe you indicated in your witness statement that the integrated plan involved a vital PLT communication and negotiation plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that when you presented the cell's proposed plan to OPS, the key role of PLT was actually specifically stressed because the cell was concerned about the lack of buy-in at OPS in relation to the role of PLT. Is that fair?
It certainly wasn't being used. We were getting information that PLT were in a tent drinking coffee and not out engaging with protesters, trying to have an understanding their intentions, whether or not there was any room to negotiate to maybe move or leave the area. They were sitting in a tent drinking coffee.
So they weren't being deployed in a way that you felt was appropriate. Is that fair?
I think the standard would be, I mean, because you're putting this, that I felt this. This is a program that was in the OPP that was born out of the Upper Wash Inquiry, for example. And they have proven their weight in gold over the years in terms of the connection that they can make with and trust that they can build with protesters or otherwise. So you can reach some common ground on some issues. If they can fix the issue or resolve the issue, that's a huge plus. But they have become a vital part. I mentioned in my cross with Mr. Slowey's counsel, we even use them now with neighbor disputes. Instead of them taking the hard hand of law enforcement laying charges on both sides, maybe we can negotiate a settlement here so that people can live in a little bit of harmony. And it works. It brings about better community safety.
And so I think part of what you're saying, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, is that in order for PLT to be effective, they have to have the autonomy to actually negotiate effectively. Is that fair?
They have the autonomy, but at the same time, they have to throw the commander's intent. They have to understand what that autonomy means, what they're being given.
Right.
And in this case, early on, it is my view, based on everything that I heard, and all the information that was provided to me, that they really did not have that direction nor autonomy.
Fair enough. And you were of the view, obviously, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that the reason PLT wasn't engaged in the way that you're describing in terms of its effectiveness was because that Chief Slowly didn't believe in the PLT program.
I think it went beyond maybe Chief Slowly, that others felt that it's time to get in there. There's a lot of pressure on them to take action that is seen to be taken.
Fair.
PLT is action taken that nobody sees.
Right.
We
So in
see
terms
it.
of, you're talking about the optics of it.
The optics of it. And so I don't think it was just Chief Slowly. I know that in my meetings with the conversations with him, there was, he had mentioned, for example, that they didn't have this type of concept with the Toronto Police Service when he was there. And that so he was not overly familiar with it as we were. We were told that negotiations had simply failed.
Right. So it perhaps is not that he didn't believe in it. It may be that he didn't understand its
Oh,
utility.
he certainly still talked about it and understood where we're going with it. Absolutely. But it was our belief, because they were challenged by Superintendent Abrams in my meeting with them on the 9th of February about PLT, because we already had it directly from PLT that they don't have authorities. They don't have autonomy. They're not doing what they do. And we were told simply that, they're used, but it's failed.
I'm sorry, who were they told that
I
by?
think that was Superintendent Patterson that said that at that meeting.
And so ultimately, when the integrated plan was agreed upon with Superintendent Bernier, and obviously with buy-in from others at OPS, there was an agreement that PLT played an important role in the dismantling of the convoy. Is that fair?
Well, I want to be careful, because that makes it sound like we negotiated what goes into a plan.
No. Yes,
'Cause
fair.
What we're talking about, what we built is what I would consider in our policing world right now for major events and protests, standard practice, template
Right.
practice in terms of the engagement. So there was agreement because it's what we do, and it works. They do provide that layer of assistance to get us to where we need to be when we take kinetic action.
Okay. I want to talk very briefly about the chain of command and have you assist those of us that don't work in policing to understand how the chain of command works. So you would agree with me that police services are paramilitary organizations, is that correct?
I wish.
You wish you agreed with me?
No, I wish they were. There was a time that we absolutely did say that we were, but I think police services have largely moved away from being able to characterize themselves. When I joined the job, we were paramilitary.
would you agree with me there is a chain of command?
But there
that
is a chain of command.
Yes, okay,
That's-
so
that's
however you
the-
describe it.
That's the only similarity that
Okay.
I probably would agree with.
So
There's a
there-
chain of command.
There is a chain of command that one expects to follow, correct?
Yes.
Within a police service. So however that's described, there is a chain of command.
Yes,
And that chain of command requires that where an officer is directed or ordered by a senior officer to do something, they're required to follow the command.
that's correct.
And in fact, it is a misconduct offense under the Police Services Act not to follow a command. As
A
long as
lawful
that-
order,
A
yes.
lawful order, correct?
Yes.
And in addition to that, would you agree with me that it would be considered unprofessional to directly question the directions of one's superior in front of partner agencies?
That's a relationship thing. I mentioned earlier about my team. I had constables, civilians up to chief on my team, and they were given, I need your voice. So yeah, you have an opinion. I need you to tell me I'm wrong. So it depends on the environment and the expectations of the leader.
Fair enough. I want to talk a little bit about the integrated command. So when the integrated planning cell arrived in Ottawa, its first activities, and we've heard about this already, involved meetings with OPS to get a sense of where their plan stood. Is that fair?
Yes,
And the integrated planning cell brought with it a fairly significant amount of planning expertise.
yes, it did.
And you indicated, with the exception of you, that these were experts in their field. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the goal of the integrated planning cell was to work with OPS to work towards a more robust overall plan.
Yes.
And we've heard throughout your testimony, and I'll use the word criticism, but perhaps you would describe it otherwise. But would it be fair to say that there's some level of criticism of the level of integration OPS was allowing with your team at this point in time when you arrived?
I think criticism is probably fair. I ran interference a lot on that very topic to actually, as I mentioned, at one point in time, publicly, it was announced we have integrated. Behind the scenes, I'm telling my folks, but we're not there yet. Integration means they're actually working with us. We're no longer in silos. We're actually talking about the direction that we're going in. And we had obstacles, but those obstacles were not just human.
Fair enough. And we do know, though, however, that Superintendent Bernier was appointed as event commander on February 11th.
Yes,
And although perhaps not the integration level that you would have liked, there was an integrated command table after he came in, correct?
it started.
It started.
The positive
Okay.
work started, and
Yes.
and that was born out of I think the commissioners heard reference to the NCRCC down in Orleans, Ottawa Police Headquarters. We're at the NOC. We have command posts in various different places that add to the complexities of integration. Ideally, you want your key command positions to be integrated and also have access to one another.
And ultimately, that does happen, right? Superintendent
Ultimately,
Bernier moves his group over to
yeah,
where you
And,
are.
and as our team worked towards securing the right position, right location at the RCP headquarters that could house the type of integrated team, we're talking well into the 100 plus that would need it on operations day. For every component of the plan, we had to have a rep there.
Right, and that takes time, obviously, to assemble
Yes.
that number of people. And one of the things that Superintendent Bernier did when he was appointed as event commander was appoint a deputy event commander. Is that right?
Correct.
And that deputy event commander was Inspector Springer,
Yes,
and he's from the OPP,
yes. I think he's retired now.
a retired member of the OPP then, perhaps?
So
And in part of that integrated team that was assembled and evolved, I guess is what you're saying, it was specialties from all different specialty units as well as members from a variety of different agencies. Is that right?
correct.
And you felt at this time, I think you indicated that even with Superintendent Bernier and the integrated table in place at this time, that there was at least a perceived need for Chief Slowly to approve any kind of planning. Is that fair?
It was still that perception amongst everyone, right down to my bosses calling and asking me. But as he approved it, they understood that Bernier had approved it, but they asked if he had, and that was that follow-up call I had with Trish Ferguson, and I trusted her. And when she said you're good to go, we went.
Right. And, you know, we talked a little bit throughout this commission hearing with various witnesses about this incident command system. We know that there's multiple iterations of it, but would you agree with me that irrespective of which version we're talking about, that the chief's requirement to sign off on an operational plan is inconsistent with that model? Is that fair?
Knowledge job, but inconsistent with approval, yes.
Correct. You indicated that your team met with Deputy Chief Ferguson on the 11th to present the plan that your team had created. Is that right?
We did that over phone, I believe.
Okay, so there was a meeting of some kind,
Yes.
right? And am I correct in saying that the plan involved the creation of a unified command?
Yes,
And you indicated, I think earlier in your testimony, that Deputy Chief Ferguson was very supportive of that plan.
very, very supportive, yes.
And you also indicated that Ferguson was your primary contact with the OPS at this time.
Yes,
And so would you agree with me that that support that she indicated on February 11th was generally consistent with the level of collaboration you saw from her during your interactions with her?
yes,
In fact, in your witness statement, you referred to Deputy Chief Ferguson as a voice of reason. Is that right?
that's fair.
Okay. And you also indicated in your testimony earlier that by this time, all of the rank and file of OPS was working well with your team. Is that right?
Yes,
And on the same day of Chief Slowly's resignation, you would agree with me that Interim Chief Bell agreed with RCMP and OPP to implement a unified command. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, call upon the government of Canada.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Check my time. You indicated in your,
Just
introduce myself. I'm sorry. My name's Donna Nygaard. I'm counsel for Canada. You indicated in your evidence in chief that police services, including the OPP, tow vehicles all the time. You have the authority to do that. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. You're talking about the authority to tow vehicles. That's something you have, and you didn't need the EA for that. But you don't, or you didn't, absent the EA, have the ability to compel tow truck drivers to assist with that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that the use of tow trucks, in particular heavy tow trucks, was instrumental to the plan to clear out the protest in Ottawa, correct?
Unequivocally.
And the integrated operation was not actually able to obtain the services of such tow trucks without the use of the EA, the Emergencies Act, in this situation, correct?
That's not entirely correct, no. So very early on, in fact, day one, we engaged with our OPP Traffic Services and Operational Support Command, Deputy DeMarco, her team that run all of our traffic programs. We had a gentleman by the name of Kirk Richardson. I believe he's a sergeant with the OPP. Everything tow his expertise, and he had the relationships with MTO. So they had been working tirelessly behind the scenes to build a plan. And I do know that they had some 34 rigs lined up. There were, however, some, I'm aware, that were reluctant because of some liability issues, and the Act gave that support.
Could I have document number ONT 50179, please? Now, you mentioned Kirk Richardson, that he's
Yes,
who was doing this, and he was doing the organization with the,
he was working directly with MTO.
right. If we can just scroll down to the first email in the chain. So yeah, just so we can see the beginning. So this is an email on February 16th from the MTO, and there's a number of recipients, including Mr. Richardson, you can see there.
Mhm.
And if you can see in the first bullet point there, it says there were 13 heavy tow trucks requested and support equipment, 11 tow trucks confirmed so far from 3 towing companies, and they were working on securing more. So that was the situation at, I think if we scroll back up at 1:19 on February 16th, and then if we continue to scroll up to the next email in the chain, I think at the bottom of the first page, we'll see the time of, if you just, so now we're at 5 in the evening that same day. And there's a follow-up email. And if we can just see there that it says in that first line, good afternoon, estimate below per day based on discussions with 2 towing companies. Third towing company has dropped out. We have total 10 trucks at this time. And then you'll see that he says, we need a letter from the OPP requesting these companies to provide services and stating that the federal act cover any damage to their equipment and indemnify them from damage or other claims resulting from vehicle towed upon a police direction. And then if we go up to the final email in the chain, you'll see that it says, hi, Veronica, I've told them that the letter will come tomorrow. They will be moving tonight based on my and Steve's commitment credibility. So would you agree with me that at the end of the day, MOT was actually only able to obtain 2 towing companies and that those were only obtained if they were compelled under the Federal Emergencies Act?
Certainly reading this, I would say that was my understanding going through that I mean, when I say tows, there's companies with multiple equipment. Was my understanding we had a significant number available, but there were holdouts that the Emergencies Act absolutely supported their engagement and to bring this to a successful conclusion.
But you'll agree with me that as far as heavy tows are concerned, this email chain makes pretty clear that they were only able to obtain these 2.
Yes, I'm fully alive to the fact that there was significant issue with tows. Our friends from Ottawa Police, in one of their preliminary plans, were going to use police officers because they could not get access to tows. They were going to use police officers that had the ability to drive those types of vehicles to remove them. So I would agree it was a significant issue.
Yes, and that the solution to that issue when it came to the heavy tow trucks was using the Emergencies Act regulations.
Certainly assisted, yes.
Thank you. You've talked in a fair amount of detail this afternoon about the importance and the role of the PLTs in
Yes,
the work they do, particularly to shrink the footprint of a protest before enforcement action is taken. And I take it based on what you've said, you'll agree with me that that was a very important part of your plan here.
yes.
And in fact, I think you said that if you had to go in without shrinking the footprint, you would have needed 10,000 officers to deal with everyone who was there.
Just means putting hands on everybody that's in there and 2 officers per, and just to do the math, you'd need a lot more officers, yes.
And if you can't shrink the footprint, not only do you need a lot more officers, but it takes more time to
Yes.
control the situation.
It's very, yes.
And also that there's more risk of violence or injuries when you've got a bigger crowd to control.
There's always risks. I mean, we assess those risks on a day by day, then on operations hour by hour, minute by minute. You know, when PLT is engaged, they're really good at reporting back to us whether or not they believe they've reached their limit. And in our plan, our measured approach, it's PLT that gives us that final nod. What's the status? Do you have any more room to move? No. Okay, they're out. We go in with positive action.
But the bigger the activity that you're trying to deal with, the more possibility there is for volatility,
Yes,
and therefore the greater chance of violence and injuries.
yes. Although I think it's important when I hear the words violence and injuries, that was a key aspect of our plan, of this integrated plan,
Yes,
to ensure that we, from start to finish, the systematic dismantling of the process is done with everything in our power to minimize injury to anybody, and we succeeded in that.
Absolutely. And you did succeed, and an important part of that was the ability of the PLTs to shrink the footprint significantly
Again,
before you
it was,
moved in.
yes, it was a good part of it.
And the BLT's ability to do that job is dependent on how persuasive they can be in convincing people to leave.
They're negotiators. You know, their role is to ensure that the protesters or those that are inside that perimeter are aware of the law, the expectations, around lawful protests. And then when they go to the point that it's no longer lawful, now you're committing criminal offenses, to inform them, negotiate. It's about building trust. Sometimes they make concessions and they're willing to do things. We have to give them the leeway to make some concessions if necessary. But if this all happens with the commanders being fully aware of what's going on with PLT, what their mandate, what autonomy they've been given, what authorities they've been given.
Yes. And one of the tools that the PLT has to convince protesters to leave is educating them on the consequences if they don't leave.
Absolutely, yes.
And presumably, the more significant those consequences, the more persuasive the PLT can be in convincing people to leave.
Yes, possibly, yes.
And in this case, when this plan was actioned and the PLTs went in to do their work to try and shrink the footprints, one of the tools that was used was a pamphlet that was handed out, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And perhaps I can just, if I can pull up OPP 401852, this is the integrated phased approached plan from February. This particular version is dated February 18th, but I understand this is just an update of the plan that was in place for at least since the 13th,
Yes.
and it was going through various iterations. And if we can go to page 5, please. It's probably actually page 6 of the document. It's page 5 on the page numbers. Yes, down towards the bottom of the page, up a little bit. Just under the bolding there, this talks about the pamphlet that was being, or it was a media release provided, but as I understand it, there was also pamphlets handed out that stated the same thing. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes.
And so there's various information that was being provided to the protesters to try and convince them to leave by the PLTs, and it's listed here. First, it mentions criminal code offenses, and if we can go to the next page. It then names a couple of consequences that, as I understand it, come out of the Ontario emergency legislation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And those consequences, in particular, the driver's license suspension and the commercial vehicle operators registration suspension, those would only be applicable against people from Ontario, correct?
No.
So the Ontario legislation allowed you to cancel suspend the driver's license of?
They seized, if that was a vehicle from out of province, plates were removed, the stickers were removed, and we would seize. And then we have those agreements with other provinces. But yes, it was my understanding on enforcement day, it's exactly how it was used.
So your understanding is that the Ontario legislation allowed
They're in the
you
province
to-
of,
just let me finish the question, allowed you to suspend the driver's license of someone from British Columbia?
who was sitting here in British Columbia. Yes, that is my understanding.
If we go down, the following bullets are all, except for the last one, measures under the federal emergency legislation,
That's
correct?
Correct.
So the personal or business accounts, the bringing the minor into the fines for bringing minors into the area, and traveling to an unlawful protest site, or delivering fuel and other supplies. Those were all under the federal
Yes.
legislation, correct? And you'll agree with me that the addition of those bullet points provided more persuasive fodder for the PLTs to convince individuals to leave.
Any piece of legislation that we were given, we used to the extent that we could possibly use it. Absolutely did support it.
And as a result of those additional tools, the PLT would have been able to convince more people to leave than they otherwise may have been able to do.
Well, I don't have any metrics for their success, but the more that you can give them, absolutely. Would-
And so that allowed you to have a smaller footprint that you were dealing with and perhaps allowed you to get to that smaller footprint faster.
Possibly.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the JCCF Democracy Fund.
Good afternoon, Mr. Commissioner.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Commissioner,
Can you speak
Okay.
up or turn up the sound a bit? Yeah,
yes, Mr. Commissioner, can you hear me better now?
yes.
Thank you. Counsel for the Government of Canada just brought up a document and showed it to the witness, and it was about tow trucks. It's against the rules, but I'm wondering if you would grant me leave to show this witness a single document which we haven't provided notice for, but which may assist him and which may assist the commission in understanding how many tow trucks may have been available.
Well, I'm not sure mechanically how we can do this.
A few questions arising of that. One is, it is a document that exists in the party database.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and are you able to provide the document ID number?
Yes, I am.
And Mr. Commissioner, obviously within your discretion, but no, the parties nor Commission Council haven't had an opportunity to review the document and see what it is. I'm not sure what it is, but one of the things that we can do is, once we know the numbers, have an opportunity to look and see what it is.
And for what it's worth, Commissioner, I was going to ask for leave to introduce probably the very same document.
Okay. Well, is there any objection? Obviously, if the OPP seems to have no problem with it, I think it should just go ahead. If you can give the number so that we can then get it before the commission.
Commissioner, can I just?
Yeah.
My only comment would be if it's in relation to the questions I was asking, and because I wasn't given notice that it was going to be put to the witness, it may raise an additional question for me. I suspect I know what document it is, but I'm not entirely sure until I see it, obviously.
Well, if you want to follow up on it, you can ask at the time, and obviously I have discretion to allow that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. The document is OPP 401585. Can we just go down to the third page, the top of the third page, please? So here you can see an email, and can you just actually scroll up a little bit so we can see who the email is from? So this is an email from Rose DeMarco. Do you know her?
Yes, she is a Deputy Commissioner of Traffic Services and Operational Support with the OPP.
And it looks like this this email is being sent to somebody at the Solicitor General's office as well as the OPP Commissioner.
Yes.
And if we just scroll down a little bit, she says there are a total of 64 heavy tow companies in the province of Ontario. Do you see that?
Yes.
And I think this is what you were referring to before. She says companies who would provide service, 7, with 34 total heavy tow units.
Yes.
And if we just look down 2 lines, she says 10 companies waiting for callback from the 57 in total.
Yes.
Now, the document that we just saw from the Government of Canada was, I believe, dated February 17th, 2022. So that's some 4 days after this document.
Correct.
And it looks like perhaps in that time, the number of tow companies who are willing to provide trucks, or the number of trucks that they can provide, decreases.
It appears, yes.
And it could be the case, could it not, that the invocation of the Emergencies Act, which happened in between these two events, actually caused tow truck drivers or tow truck companies to become more reluctant to provide their services or to put conditions upon their services, such as indemnification for damages?
It is possible, but I personally don't believe that, sir. There was a reluctance very, very early with tow companies to be engaged. As I mentioned, the OPS on February 9th were unable to get any tow companies to engage, to the point that they were going to use their own people. And I do believe there's even reference to getting the military to come in and tow some vehicles for them if needed. So while it may have had an impact, I think it was an issue. And I think that issue was connected broadly to the broader issue that we were dealing with in the public domain, namely the pandemic, this massive protests, and the unwillingness of some agencies to simply be engaged.
Well, it was an issue on February the 9th, as you say. And it was still an issue on February the 13th, but there were some trucks there. There were some 34 trucks. Can you think of anything material that changed between the 13th and the 17th, other than the invocation of the Emergencies Act, which would cause fewer companies to agree to the OPP using their trucks or to providing services to the OPP?
I think the key comment that I think is appropriate for me on the tow issue is that we knew it was a contentious, our team knew it to be a contentious issue from the very start of our deployment. I was fortunate to have a team that I could just say, can you deal with this? And Kurt Richardson, MTO, and the folks in that email right up to Deputy Commissioner DeMarco took that off our plate. So they might be in a better position to answer that question. I simply asked for a tow plan, and can you give me people that have the capability to develop that plan? And I got a plan, and it worked.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me change topics here for just a moment. We heard from your OPP colleague, Superintendent Patrick Morris, not long ago, that he thought some of what the media was reporting was problematic. Did you hear that evidence?
I did not hear his evidence. And I think I listened in on about 10 minutes of it as I was arrived in Ontario, looking to do some of my own prep, so I didn't spend a lot of time.
Are you aware that he testified that he read accounts of, for example, Russia being involved in the protests, and he found that to be problematic?
I think I may have read that somewhere, yes.
In your evidence today, you adopted a will say. And in that will say, you stated, the media was not portraying what was on the ground. Can you tell us what your concerns were?
Well, it's just the things were happening, and this protest group were incredibly well organized, in my opinion. And the narrative about what was happening in Ottawa was being controlled, or was one-sided. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, and that's the basis for that comment, because there was a lot of good things happening. You know, there's things that were going on within the protest group, that we heard about the bouncy castles and the prayer meetings in the mornings, but we didn't hear publicly about threats to people inside the perimeter who wanted to leave and they didn't want them to leave. We didn't hear about that publicly. Things of that nature. It's just but one small example of the narrative that was out there about, this is a family event. Bring your kids. There's a bouncy castle. We can have fun. Yet there were people within that red zone that wanted to leave, felt threatened, and couldn't leave.
And you didn't think that was being accurately conveyed by the media?
It was not being conveyed at all, in my opinion.
What about something like what Patrick Morris testified to, that the protesters were being portrayed as extremists, and he found that to be problematic? Did you find that to be problematic as well?
I do, because I've been involved in the events in the past, from OAS summits to some of the G events, where we had a lot of extremist views. There was fringes of it with the two groups, I believe, that were around Nicholas and Waller and Rito Sussex, maybe. were of concern, but they were not a major concern. But there's always that risk of escalation that you see from those extremist groups. It was the profile of the protester for this event was none like I've ever seen in my 36-year career. We had everything from grandparents. My first day in this assignment, I was shown a picture of 2 officers that had worked for me in the past, who were retired, who were in the crowd with the protesters. We saw children. We saw a lot of crestfallen police officers in the crowd, military, nurses. So it wasn't your normal group of people that you're dealing with. So I guess that's the point. Was there still concerns from our perspective on extremism? Absolutely. But we relied on and trusted the intelligence as it came in on that regard.
Thank you very much, sir. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Next, call on the City of Ottawa, please.
Good afternoon, Chief Superintendent. My name is Ann Tardif, and I'm one of the lawyers representing the City of Ottawa.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. If I could turn up or ask to be turned up, OPP 401792. And sir, these are your notes. I don't know if you have a hard copy there that you'd prefer to refer to, but otherwise it'll go up on the screen.
I'll wait for the screen, sure.
And could I ask that you turn to page 3, please, of the document? Now, this is just to show you the date at the top, sir, the 8th of February, 2022. And if we could scroll down to about the middle of page 4. A little bit lower. There we go. Now, do you see there's an arrow there that has the word "from federal government" at the end of it? And I'm going to ask you if you could help me out with your handwriting for the first part of it.
Yeah, you may have to help me with my handwriting. Sorry.
Do you see it there? There's an arrow about just below the middle line of the
Yes.
page. What did you write there?
Daily siege from federal government.
Daily siege from federal government.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that,
Just
sir?
pressure.
Pressure. And was this pressure that was being placed upon the Ottawa Police Service?
Police service, the community to get this resolved.
On Ottawa as a whole to get this resolved,
Yes.
basically. And was this siege being applied just, privately in calls to the chief or to city officials, or was this occurring publicly?
Well, this is notes that I took on being briefed on my assignment.
Okay.
It might be better from those who gave me that, but that was my sense from the briefing that there was pressure around like this. We got to get this fixed.
And can you just help us out? Who provided this briefing?
It was jointly provided by Commissioner Creek, Deputy Commissioner Harkins, Mike McDonnell at Injex as it related to POU, and Craig Abrams, who was on Video Link, gave us the overview of the state that was up to that point.
Okay. Thank you. So we can ask them about this. And I take it they were relaying this to you in your briefing because that meant that that was impacting the response in Ottawa, making things more difficult, if I can put it that way.
Yes.
If we could turn now to page 12 of the document, please. Okay, and if you could scroll to the bottom of the page, Madam Clerk. Now, we can go back if you need me to, sir. We're on February 9th at this
Okay.
point. If you could stop there, Madam Clerk. Do you want me to go backwards to see the date, or you're all right? Okay, let me know if you do want me to. Do you see the entry there, 10:34
Yes.
on February 9th? And it says a TC, which I take it as telephone call
Yes.
from Deputy Harkins. Is that right?
Yes.
And he's the Deputy Commissioner for Field Operations at
That's
the
correct.
OPP. It says, need to be looking at this more broadly, and there's an asterisk, Ambassador Bridge shut down.
Yes.
We could scroll to the next page, please. 402, that's the highway, right?
Yes,
shut down both directions, 40 kilometers from the border by farm tractors.
yes,
Economic impact equals $350 million per day, right?
Yes.
Correct?
correct.
And then it says big auto, and there's an arrow, 24 hours, and they shut down factories. Is that right?
To shut down factories.
Shut down factories. Okay. And this is being reported to you by Deputy Commissioner Harkins.
Correct.
And then the next, I'll skip over the next asterisk only because I think that may relate to Toronto. Is that right?
That's regarding the GTA dump for waste would be impacted of where it could go.
Because of the closure of the 402.
Yes,
Okay, so this is an impact on the Toronto garbage dump arising from the blockade at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor.
well, not the ambassador, because it's Lambton County, and I'm sorry, my geography for Western Ontario is a little off.
Okay,
It may have been as a result of 402,
I see.
which is separate from,
Understood.
Yeah.
And then it says, planning to block access to impact Toronto. That's what you just told
Yeah.
us. And then the final little note here, it says request to determine what and what's that next word?
current resource deployment is to the city of Ottawa.
Okay, perfect. And then if we turn over the page to page 24. And so now we're at February 10th, and I'm actually, if you could just go up to page 23, Madam Clerk, we'll just see the beginning of this. Do you see it down a bit. Do you see it 9:21?
Yes,
So this is again a telephone call with Deputy Harkins, and it says I guess you and the deputy were joined later by Commissioner Creek. Is that correct?
correct.
And this is on February 10th.
Yes,
And before we get into this, I just want to back up a little bit. So we talked about the call just the day prior on February 9th, where you're alerted to the situation in Windsor, and asked about the current resource deployment to the city of Ottawa. And February 9th is the same day that you had I'm going to call it the meeting at Elgin Street headquarters of the Integrated Planning Group with OPS Command. Is that right?
that's correct.
Okay. And coming out of that, you mentioned earlier in your testimony, there was an ask for staffing, and I think you said the number was 516.
Correct.
Right. And that was a maintenance ask.
Yes,
So in other words, that's the number of officers OPS needed from OPP just to maintain the current posture and traffic points, right?
yes. As I said earlier, though, there was some math problem with it. Ultimately, that number you divide 516 by 3, I think it's 174 or 178 or something like that, because they had been employing a 3-shift model. And as we talked it through it, it was like, oh, we forgot to tell you, we actually, with the support of the Ottawa Police Association, they had reverted back to the 2-shift model, which would allow you to spread. There are inherent benefits with the 3-shift model, but with my organization coming in, it certainly would be a benefit beyond the same type of rotation, which they did. The RCMP, however, remained on a 3-shift model.
Okay, so I don't think we need to get quite to the level of specificity of numbers, but if I understand it, the maintenance ask on 3 shifts was 516, that's correct?
On 3 shifts,
On 3 shifts. And if you drop it to 2 shifts, which you said you were able to do, then it's probably closer to 300. Is that about right?
I would put it in the range of 350.
Okay,
plus.
350. In other words, it's about a third less.
It's a third less.
Okay, whatever that number amounts to, fair enough. So that's the number that comes out for maintenance of the February 9th planning meeting. But of course, the OPS was also looking for additional POU supports for their enforcement action, correct?
Absolutely.
And the decision of the OPP coming out of that planning meeting was, we will meet your maintenance ask, we'll supply what turned out to be approximately 350 officers to maintain the current posture.
Mhm.
But at this time, we're not going to move forward with the POU ask for the reasons you've already explained relating to the planned, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that's not accurate.
That's not accurate. My
No,
apologies.
we continue to deploy POU, to make plans for POU. We had, there was obviously a plan in Windsor at the Ambassador Bridge for action down there, but that did not slow us down. We knew that it was going to, of course, it was going to impact because we're drawing from the same pool,
Sure.
but it did not stop. We just realized at that stage that Because if I'm not mistaken, Darwin Tetro in that same meeting said, we need that 800. That's about all that we have in the province of Ontario. Suddenly we have to pivot. We're not going to get all we have in the province of Ontario because they're going to be used and they're going to be needed down in Windsor. Then we started our outreach to Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, and the province of Quebec.
Okay, well, in fairness, do you let me show you where I thought I saw that information, and you can perhaps correct me if I'm wrong. Can we go to page 19, please, of this document? Okay, and actually just scroll up a little bit, please, Madam Clerk, the following page. So there's that 516 number, right? 3 shifts as documented by OPS, 516, that's the maintenance number. And we've explained that they went down to 2 shifts, so it ends up being more like 350, correct?
Yep.
And now let's scroll down, Madam Clerk. Now, I see a number of POU requests here, and if we keep scrolling down, okay, stop there. You'll see the lowest POU you get, POU by this stage, 55 plus 600. So that was their POU ask coming out of the planning meeting on the 9th, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And can we scroll down a little bit more, Madam Clerk, please? And then, whoa, stop there. And then you'll see where it says 1635. Do you see that?
Yes,
It says briefed team. These are your notes, right, sir?
yes.
And then it says, will staff to the maintenance plan, which has roles and responsibilities
Yep.
built in, continue to build our plan, right? So that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, and that's accurate, but
Okay,
when we talk about that in our plan and we continue to bill, we're asking as we need. You know, we add people, we we're not taking action. We're not in a position. We
Right.
needed 800.
and that's what I meant earlier. For the
So we-
reasons you've discussed, the
Yep.
plan's not there. Right now, you're staffing to the maintenance ask because that's what
Yeah.
you think is needed in Ottawa right then.
And our ask will immediately go out for others now. We want others to join in. We need the SQ, we need Vancouver, we need Calgary and Edmonton to join the team because we need this number. And then the logistics around arranging all that, getting the approvals, the supports for them to be deployed were occurring.
And I understand that, but at this point, the immediate decision is to staff to the maintenance plan. Can we agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, back to page 24, please, Madam Clerk. We're going to move ahead to February 10th. And we'll scroll up to up to the following page, sorry, 921. This is where we were. Telephone call with Deputy Harkins, joined later by Commissioner Creek. We'll scroll down to page 24. And if I could stop you, Madam Clerk, at the CC. Do you see that there? That's Commissioner Creek, I'm assuming, since he joined the call later.
I think so.
Okay. And it says, provincial priority has changed due to ongoing, and you'll have to help me with the next word,
Issue in Windsor.
issue, thank you, due to ongoing issue in Windsor, both from, I think that's Intel and
Intel.
impact assessment.
Yes.
Okay. It is now our priority, it being Windsor,
Yeah.
while continuing to support the RCMP/OPS in Ottawa. We may not be in position to supply Ottawa with all they need at this juncture.
Correct.
Right, and that's what Commissioner Creek told you on the morning of February 10th, correct?
Yes.
Just to put us in time, that's the Thursday, right, before the weekend, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's my understanding that the maintenance ask, the approximately 350 officers, was actually only fulfilled on the morning of Saturday, February 12th. Is that accurate?
You know, I'd need a lot of information in front of me to be very specific in terms of when we finally did it. We certainly made the ask. And
Yeah, and no one's suggesting otherwise. So
Yeah.
I can pull up a document. It's not a problem.
no, if you
It's-
say it was reported that it took till then to do it, I believe that.
Okay.
It was a struggle. A lot of people did not want to be deployed to Ottawa,
A lot of people I missed the last part,
did not want to be deployed there.
to Ottawa.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you want people to want to be there, but it was a struggle.
Right. So and the circumstances you're describing, Windsor and the reasons you've just described, that explains why the ask being made took, from February 9th to February 12th to be fulfilled by the OPP. Right.
And when you say OPP, and OPP and partner agencies,
Of course.
wasn't just, I just happened to be OPP here. Okay? We're there with an integration with multiple agencies. We're all in it together.
I understand. Let me be fair to you. It took 3 days for OPP together with all of its partner agencies
Sure.
to fulfill the maintenance ask by OPS.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. Thank you. Next, the convoy organizers.
Good afternoon, Mr. Commissioner. Good afternoon, Chief Party. My name is Bathsheba Vandenberg, and I'm counsel representing Freedom Corp and protesters. I have a few questions for you this afternoon. I'd like to ask you about the February 9th plan I referred to earlier today. It contemplated building a public order unit plan. Is that right?
Yes. Oh,
And-
sorry. The February 9th plan that the Ottawa Police presented to us?
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Was the first operation of that February 9th plan to clear Rideau, Sussex on Thursday, February the 10th at 6 a.m.?
It was going to be 4 a.m. with a possibility of being moved up to 11 p.m. on that date that they were telling us.
Okay. And was it Event Commander Patterson who wanted to deploy POUs as part of executing that plan?
Well, we didn't get into the weeds in terms of numbers, but POU was part of the plan that they were going to execute, and an incident commander had been assigned on that plan.
Thank you. And yesterday, Superintendent Abrams testified that the police liaison teams, PLTs, were not involved in the planning process. And he suspected that Event Commander Patterson did not communicate this plan to the PLTs. Is that right?
Yes, that's fair.
Were you aware that at the same time as the integrated cell planning, what you called the group, that the PLTs were negotiating a plan with some of the protesters to start moving trucks on February 10th from the Rideau Sussex intersection?
I don't have independent recollection right now, and there's so much that was going on. It's possible, yes.
Was the February 9th plan abandoned because there were not enough POUs?
Well, what happened, myself and Phil Liu, prior to leaving Ottawa headquarters, met with Acting Superintendent Burnett. We both knew him, and Phil had worked closely with him in the years prior. We stopped by to say hello as we were leaving the building, aware that he was being assigned the task. We didn't get into the details of it, other than he told us that he had some legal concerns that he was seeking advice on, and that from there he was going to be consulting with his POU experts.
Okay.
He consulted, and at 18:20 that day, we learned that they did consult with the broader group, and they didn't find it to be tactically sound and decided to defer.
And that was on February 10th?
I learned that on February 10th, yes.
Because notwithstanding what was
No, sorry. I learned that on February 9th that it was shut down.
just discussed now on February 10th, we learned that the Commissioner Carrick mentioned to you that there was a lack of availability of POU resources. And also, did RCMP Sergeant Tethrow also tell you this, that there was a lack of POU resources?
Well, we knew that, POU was going to be stretched in the province with the capacity that we had.
Are you aware that the RCMP put a freeze for 72 hours from February 10th to 13th on any POU intervention?
I need to know some greater context. I'm not sure where that's from. I don't recall it, but I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Okay, thank you. Earlier today, the mission statement of the February 13th plan was put to you, and it included a reference to the utmost respect to the individual charter of rights and freedoms. Is that right?
Yes.
And part of that February 13th plan to contain a main action plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that the mission statement provides strategic direction to operations. Is that
Yes.
correct? And that the objective of the main action plan was to de-escalate and negotiate a peaceful resolution and demobilization of the Ottawa truck demonstration. Is that right?
Yes.
On February 14th, you continued to work on developing the February 13th plan with a group of POU SMEs. Is that correct?
Correct.
The February 17th plan referred to in your testimony, officially titled Integrated Public Order Unit Concept of Operations, is also referred to as POU Tactical Plan or Action Plan, correct?
Yes, it's a sub-plan of the master plan.
Right. And the objective of that February 17th action plan was to systematically clear and take down the protests, right?
Correct.
I put it to you that the mission of the February 17th action plan was to ensure the removal of the protesters in the area of the blockades in relation to the Freedom Convoy 2022. This will be achieved by securing, isolating, and evacuating persons within the designated blockade zones to ensure the safe detention and arrests of any participants taken into custody, ensure public and police safety. You agree that there is no reference to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in the February 17th action plan?
The mission has it. That's normally where it's contained, but what you read there, no.
Thank you. Those are all my questions, and thank you for your 36 years of service.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I could now call on the government of Saskatchewan. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Sir, my name is Mike Morris, and I'm counsel for the government of Saskatchewan. I'm just going to have a few questions for you today. Would you agree with me that the OPP, the RCMP, and the OPS did not need the Federal Emergencies Act to be invoked to set up an integrated command structure?
For the purposes of setting up an integrated command structure, no. We've done that in every major event that we've had with OPS in the past.
And I gather you'd agree that those same police forces didn't need the Federal Emergencies Act to be invoked to come up with an operational plan for removing the occupation in Ottawa, correct?
I would agree with that.
And you signed off on the operational plan that was ultimately used on February 12th on behalf of the OPP, correct?
That was a version. There were multiple versions, but that was a version, yes.
Okay. And I understand the RCMP approved that same version of the plan on February 12th as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think we've heard that the OPS approved that same version of the plan on February 13th, correct?
Correct.
And when you signed off on that plan, you were confident that it could be implemented to end the occupation, correct?
Yes.
And the February 13th plan did not contemplate any powers under the Federal Emergencies Act, correct?
Not at that time, no.
And as commander of the Integrated Planning Cell, if you had thought that such powers were needed, you would have told someone, correct?
Well, we certainly felt that we had what we needed to develop a plan to dismantle the protests with what we had.
Thank you, sir. Those are my questions.
Yeah, thank you. Next, if I could call on the government of Alberta.
Good afternoon. My name is Mandy England, and I'm asking some questions today on behalf of the government of Alberta. Sir, you mentioned in your response to counsel for the government of Canada that some tow truck operators were reluctant due to liability issues to engage in the towing, and so the Emergencies Act was helpful in that respect. Was that correct?
That's correct.
And so would it be fair to say that there were tow truck drivers who were willing to do it? They would not have needed to be compelled to do it, but they just wanted that additional reassurance about liability?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. Isn't it true that there are also provisions under the Ontario Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act that protect individuals who are acting in good faith and performing an order under that act from an action against them for liability in performing that duty?
I do believe so, yes.
And is it true that there's provisions under that act that provide a way for anyone whose property is damaged where an order under the act is being carried out to seek compensation from the province itself rather than from an individual like a tow truck operator who's carrying out the order?
Well, I'll be honest, now you're getting into weeds of it that I'd have to say I need to look at it to see what it
Fair
provided,
enough.
but I was looking at it and I focused mostly on the enforcement powers that it gave us.
If what I had just said was true, that there was a mechanism for that individual to have sought compensation, would you agree that between those two items, that if there was an order under the Ontario Act authorizing the tow truck drivers to provide those towing services, that those operators would be protected in the same way by the Ontario Act?
I'm not sure, because I know we had some difficulties with our earlier planning where we had a robust toll plan in place and it all fell apart because of the indemnity issue and the length of time for that indemnity, that the operators just felt that given the nature of the protests, the fear of reprisal, that they needed an extended period of indemnity that we just couldn't provide. So
Okay.
I left the tow issue to our tow experts, but I'd have to look at the legislation, maybe even consult the lawyer looking at the legislation as to how far and how deep the indemnity of either the EMCPA or the EA provided.
That's fair. If the provisions were the same or substantially similar, though, would you agree that the Ontario legislation would have been equally helpful then in providing the assurances to tow truck operators?
If you're telling me that, then I would say it would be.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions for you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does the OPP have any re-examination
Excuse me.
or any examination?
Sorry, excuse me, Mr. Commissioner. I believe before we get to the party for the witnesses, the Ottawa Coalition did have 5 minutes and the party for the witness usually gets to go last.
I am sorry, I must have skipped them. I apologize. Mr. Champ, you have 5 minutes and I'll even give you 6 if you need it, given my error.
I'll be 4. Good afternoon, Chief Superintendent. Thank you for joining us. My name is Paul Champ. I'm a lawyer for the Ottawa Coalition for Residents and Businesses.
Yes.
Just a few questions for you, Chief Superintendent. I've represented police officers for many years, for about 20 years, and it's been my experience that there's a lot of very strong personalities in policing. Is that fair to say?
Very fair.
Strong characters, strong leaders, and sometimes those personalities can conflict.
Yes.
And similarly, when you have these strong personalities in leadership positions, it can be kind of difficult for them to give up leadership or maybe admit they're wrong or seek assistance. Is that fair to say?
Yes and no. Sometimes it's a failure of leadership for not doing it, not asking for help.
That's fair. Where I was going to go at, wanted to ask you about, Chief Superintendent, is that you told us before about how a chief of police in Ontario can ask the Ontario Provincial Police to take over their service or assist their service in cases of emergency, correct?
Yes.
And Chief Slowly didn't do that in these circumstances.
No.
But it's also the case that under the Police Services Act, the board could ask the OPP to take over, correct? The Police Services Board?
Yes.
Or the Ontario Civilian Police Commission?
Yes.
So if they have the relevant or proper information, they could have considered that and weighed that option?
Yes, they could.
And you would agree with me that given the prevailing conditions in Ottawa at that time, the Ottawa police simply couldn't provide adequate and effective policing services to their community.
I'd say they were stretched as it related specifically to the protests. to say that they were not otherwise providing, because Ottawa is not just the downtown core, sir.
That's fair. Absolutely. For the rest
So,
of it.
you know, because we talk regularly with them about their ability to respond to their day-to-day business.
Right. But we've heard lots of evidence, and I don't think it's really in dispute, that the Ottawa Police Services simply did not have the capacity to bring this event to an end on their own. The numbers were such, the scale was such, it was recognized generally. The Ottawa Police couldn't end this on their own, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And it took an enormous amount more of police resources from elsewhere to bring an end to this, correct?
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, like, I was taking a look and reviewing the national framework on police preparedness for demonstrations and assemblies, and there's nothing in there about what happens if the demonstration is of such a scale that the police force of jurisdiction can't manage it, and in how or in what way there could be a trigger for them to ask for another service to maybe even take over if they're having a real problem. Would you agree with me, Chief Superintendent, that more policy or protocol around that for how police services can feel comfortable reaching out to get assistance would be helpful?
It absolutely would.
Yeah, if Chief Soley had some more guidance on that, or his strong personality, maybe he felt he was kind of getting it from all sides. I think we've heard a lot of evidence from that, felt embattled. But if there was a policy there saying, hey, at this point, that's a trigger, you should actually cede responsibilities to another service, that perhaps could have helped this crisis. Would you agree?
Whether or not it's ceding responsibility to another organization, you know, I'll just back up and qualify this answer with another statement. The OPP policy, for example, when an incident exhausts the ability of the local detachment to respond, we will stand up an EOC. So we have a more coordinated response. Because now we're going to be needing resources from other. So it's kind of inbred in our nature that when an event overwhelms one jurisdiction, OPP jurisdiction, and others are needed, we stand up a broader group to support, to ensure that the response, so that the locals can still focus and we can bring in supports. So I don't believe it's about policy that you would have to cede responsibility, but certainly that when you are overwhelmed, that it's time to ask and integrate with other organizations to seek their assistance to collectively bring an end to the unlawful activity.
I hear you, Chief Superintendent, but I guess just what I'm suggesting is that it's a little bit ad hoc, right? There's no real good guidance for a chief about when might be the right time to press the emergency button.
I would say there probably is no guidance or written guidance in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Superintendent.
Thank you. Now I will call on the OPP.
Good afternoon, sir. It's Christopher Diana, Councillor of the OPP, as you know. I'd like to maybe take a step back a little bit. You've answered a lot of questions about, the details of what happened in Ottawa. Part of the mandate of this commission, and part of what I think the commissioner may be interested in hearing about as well, is taking a look at the bigger picture. Lessons learned is part of the mandate of this commission. And you're in a unique position as a recent retiree with 36 years of experience doing this kind of public order policing and incident command, to maybe give some thoughts that may be of assistance to the commissioner. And the question I wanted to ask you in particular is about an integrated or unified command. Do you believe in the value of that concept?
Absolutely. It's absolutely critical to our success in any event where it's beyond the scope of one organization.
Right. And what are some of the impediments? So if we're looking at lessons learned, what are some of the impediments going forward that the commissioner may want to consider while contemplating the evidence that he hears?
Well, we've already heard about, the personalities that exist in a lot of police leadership roles. And oftentimes that can be the impediment. They simply don't want to, they want to do this on their own. They don't need help, or I need your help, but I want command and control of your resources. There's an organization out there that I know of that would ever say, okay, we'll send you 500 officers and just use them gently. It doesn't work that way. When you deploy 500-600 officers to another organization, they come with the command and control. If you don't integrate, you're going to be working in silos. If you don't integrate, you're not going to be communicating about the ultimate strategic objectives and goals of what you're trying to accomplish. So it's absolutely critical that leaders buy in. Leadership is actually absolutely key at all levels, in my humble opinion. If you don't have the leadership team buying in, then it's not going to work.
And I think just to maybe kind of drill down a little bit into the why. Why is a unified command a useful tool, even if there's an event in a larger city that has a large police service? Ottawa has a fairly large police service. Toronto or other large police services may benefit from this concept, but maybe you can explain why this is useful. Toronto Police Service, for example, may have a lot of resources, but why is a unified team useful for a large event?
Well, it's unified because of, the power of the human brain. The more people that you have, the more expertise you bring to bear on a problem, the more communication that you have, your solution is going to be that much more refined and appropriate. It takes, as I mentioned earlier in my evidence, it takes the weight off the one pair of shoulders who is feeling the burden of this event. And I feel for Chief Slowly, the burden that he was under for this event. But bringing in an integrated command and all that it brings to bear with the resources, the subject matter expertise, can only produce a win.
Ultimately, though, it comes down to whether the police service of jurisdiction kind of buys into the concept, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, can I just check with the Government of Canada? Are you content? There's nothing further you'd like? No? Okay, I just have a couple of questions, Chief Party. About, there have been words about what the operation, and it's been referred to, as I understand it, as ending the occupation, but also some people have said ending the protest. Is there a difference in your mind between the approach of saying the plan is to end the protest or end the occupation?
I certainly have used them synonymous today as one and the same. It was absolutely, in my view, an occupation, but it's often referred to as a protest. A protest can be an occupation. So they're one and the same from my view.
Okay, and in that, I just want to ask you if you could have a look at your mission statement, and we've had it referred to, and I think it's OPP 1851. And I think we might be at page 8. I think if I'm correct. For the, go down a bit, it's up a bit. It's the mission statement I'm looking for. No, that's not the right document then.
It would be in that document, sir.
Okay, and where would it?
Maybe it's down.
Okay, maybe further down. I think it was.
I believe it's page 8.
Page 8?
If we had just gone down a little bit from where we were.
There it is. Okay. And I'm wondering here, you've put in with the utmost respect to the individual's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I was wondering, was there any thought about there are protesters there that may wish to protest appropriately, if I can call it, without breaking law, i.e. continue a protest legally in some manner in some place?
Yes.
Was that taken into account?
Absolutely was taken into consideration in our messaging through PLT. That, you want to protest where you are now is deemed illegal. You need to leave. You want to protest, there's other venues. And this is why we put in this mission about the Charter of Rights, because there are lawful protests that you can do.
I guess that's why I was wondering about your answer of saying ending the protest and ending the occupation you took as being the same.
The same, but I guess I should qualify within that red zone that's now deemed to be an illegal occupation. If you're in there, you're breaking the law. If you're in there, you need to leave because it has been deemed illegal, what you're doing, an illegal occupation. So that meant, because we had a lot of people that our PLT interacted with, that continually pleaded that, well, we're all doing everything lawful. They had this, a lot of them felt they had that plausible deniability until so PLT had to educate them. Okay, it's a lawful protest to a point. Now you've reached a point, there's injunctions, there's criminal mischief going on. There's all these things that are happening. This protest, this demonstration, this occupation is now deemed unlawful and you need to leave. If they chose, and we gave people an exit strategy, if they chose, well, we'd like a protest location where our voice can be heard, that would have been facilitated by PLT.
Okay, so the PLT was seeking to shrink the footprint, but are you saying they also would facilitate a continuing legal protest in some location or in some manner?
If someone said to them, but we have a right to protest, they would have said, not here. There's other ways that you can protest, but now you're in an illegal zone to protest. And they when I say facilitate, I mean, they're not going to, stop what they're doing so we can now set up a place for you to protest. But they would certainly, and we've done that. I'll use the example of G8. We set up the protest stages, everything. You want to protest? Here, you go here and protest. PLT, they'll help facilitate this because you're not getting to there.
Okay. Was there any part of the plan that provided for this aspect that you've just described, that you could continue your protest legally, just not here?
I think by that time we had exhausted all negotiation. And without reading the final plan, I would say no, because our negotiations with the protesters had reached a point that they were proving to be futile. So now enforcement action was next. Now, in that measured approach.
Are you aware of people or members of the public in media or otherwise criticizing after the fact the operation, saying they simply wish to peacefully protest?
I don't doubt that. I don't independently recall those. I didn't actually. I avoided the media and the news.
Fair enough.
So I could focus. But I don't particularly recall it, but I don't doubt it. We have to look at that with very, very carefully. I'm certain there was a lot of people in that protest zone when they realized, like, oh, they're actually telling us the truth. This is an illegal occupation now. We have to move. They skedaddled out of there because they're, as I mentioned earlier, about the profile of we'd ever seen. There was a lot of good people in there that simply wanted their voice to be heard. We knew that, but they were mixed with a lot of danger as well inside, in terms of the potential and threats of violence that existed in there. So we gave the opportunities. That was all part of the negotiations. They even looked at having alternate locations for the trucks to go, so that they could stage there and we'll bus you to for a protest. And that did not work out.
And so just to close that loop, do you feel the plan was adequate in terms of allowing continued protests for those who may wish it in retrospect?
At the stage where we executed this plan and went kinetic, i.e. we went hands-on with the operation, that was the option that was left available to us. With all other aspects of the plan exhausted, I do believe that we acted appropriately, professionally, and accomplished not only our mission, but all of our goals and objectives in terms of assisting in restoring the confidence and faith in the city of Ottawa and Ottawa Police, returning Ottawa to a relative state of normalcy for business to be able to open, and doing so without injuring people and having to arrest too many people. We know our justice, a lot of people put a lot of stock in arrest. We also know our justice system just doesn't have the ability for us to arrest and charge 3,000 people. We all know what would happen there. So I believe that we accomplished those goals and did so and returned, because very shortly thereafter, there were protests again in the city of Ottawa that were permitted and were peaceful.
Thank you. One other thing I just want to explore briefly, you spoke about PLTs and I don't know how to put it. It was not necessarily embraced as it maybe should have been by OPS in this operation. Is that fair?
In their initial.
Yes.
The
I
leading
meant
up.
the initial.
You know, within a day of our arrival there, we engaged with Marcel Baudin, who I believe you're going to be hearing from. We got things back on, they collectively, when I say we, got it back on track with a PLT focus.
Now, a lot of the work of PLT involves, as you've talked about, negotiating, de-escalating.
Yes.
And for those who wish to bring a quick end to a protest, PLTs maybe are not viewed in the same way, or they're viewed as delaying what they wish as a result.
My personal opinion is if we took an enforcement action directly every time just to end it, we'd be sitting before another commission of inquiry and a road about a lack of a measured approach. So in my humble opinion, I would use PLT in every circumstances. They might last 10 minutes and be rendered ineffective, but we've tried. We've tried the negotiation route. We've tried the de-escalation route. It did not work before we go kinetic.
Yeah, you may be going the wrong direction. You're thinking I'm going the wrong direction. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Okay.
What I'm trying to get at is the public often is not aware of the role and importance of PLTs because they want results. Would that be fair? In some cases.
I would say it's a fair statement, sir.
Okay. And I guess all I'm asking is, do you think an important component in a protest such as this is educating the public on the need for the process to be worked through, negotiation, et cetera? In other words, because we heard a lot about public pressure to close this down. And I'm just asking whether there is a role for public education.
There's a significant role. In fact, when you look, I'm sure you'll get this from Inspector Baudin, a lot of what PLT does, because it's not just with the protesters that they deal with, a lot of what they do is education as well. You know, our PLTs are active not just in the middle of a crisis. They're active. So education is absolutely critical. The public needs to know. When we engage PLT in these events, we have PLT members who are dealing with the business association. We have PLT members dealing with the residents so that we know collectively all of the issues that we're facing. So they're not just negotiating with the protesters necessarily. They're looking at everybody that is impacted by education. I would love for every member of the public to become a PLT. One of our goals in our communication strategy was to make every uniform officer with their messaging from the constable on the street up to the Prime Minister of Canada. If we could get everybody saying the same message, we're educating the public, we will succeed. That was a stated goal right within our mission.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And thank you for your testimony. We appreciate, even though you're in retirement. Yes, I'm sorry.
My apologies. I have just a few questions. This is for the record. Brendan Miller, counsel for the Freedom Corp. Arising from your questions. I had none until some answers came out. There's just probably about 2 minutes of questions I would like to ask, if I may, sir, with respect to the evidence from the witness regarding there being no more ability to negotiate, et cetera, given that I understand that that wasn't the case, sir.
There is no provision for a re-examination. We're not going to reopen it. There will be plenty of witnesses you can question about the process as they come through, but I'm not going to reopen because you wouldn't be the only one.
Very well, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, thank you for your testimony, and especially since you're retired. Appreciated. We're going to rise until Monday morning at 9:30. Thank you.
The commission is adjourned. La commission est adjournée.